This is Hoop Coop 2, my 2,000 square foot duck, goose, and chicken house. And in today's video, I'm gonna show you how I built this entire thing. And yes, this video is sponsored by my friends over at Growspan. Like I said, Hoop Coop 2 is about 2,000 square feet. It's big enough to house all of my birds for the winter. I prefer keeping my birds in a greenhouse type structure because I find it so much easier for them to be able to stay warm in the winter, keep their water from freezing. And this structure was so massive that I was able to drive my entire chicken coop, my mobile chicken coop, in here to house it for the winter. I use a deep litter bedding system for the ground. I just add more straw or more hay. That really helps create a nice earthy compost. And when it's time to clear out for the spring, I just have to open that big bay door and I can use my tractor to clean it out. Now I am super excited about this structure because it's the byproduct of a hard lesson learned. You see, last year I tried to house my ducks and geese and chickens in a similar type of structure, but that did not go so well.
It's been a crazy couple of days here on the farm. We had a big blizzard, then we had a calf born in the blizzard, and we had absolutely insane winds last night. Oh dear.
No! No!
Look at that. Hey geese. Hey chickens. And yeah, the lining, oh no, it ripped all the way through. This was all one solid piece. This is not good at all. Well, you guys like living outdoors, so you got this going for you. I always thought snow load was gonna be the thing I had to worry about. But that wasn't the case here. There was barely any snow on it last night as I locked everybody up. And this whole piece just sort of ripped down the middle.
Yeah, I was really disappointed when the original Hoop Coop was destroyed. I really thought that it was a good plan. It was just poorly executed. And so rather than trying to jury rig my own structure and jury rig my own Hoop Coop as I tried to build Hoop Coop 2, I did a bit of research.
Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
And I came across this company called Growspan.
This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia.
Growspan has been one of the leaders in industrial and greenhouse and agricultural structures like these. They've been doing it for more than 40 years. And as I did a lot of my research and due diligence and I started to talk to the folks over at Growspan, I was super impressed with what their kits could offer. And when I finally decided the Growspan Gothic Pro greenhouse was the right greenhouse for me, I felt super confident in my decision and knew that it was the right choice. And when Growspan asked if they could be a sponsor, I said, heck yeah. So tell me, chickens, what do you think of the new structure, huh? Are you guys excited about this space? Now, as regular viewers of our YouTube channel will know, to build the Growspan Gothic Pro greenhouse took a little bit of work. But quite honestly, it wasn't too bad to build because I had the help of my buddy Alfred.
My buddy Alfred, he lives on down the road. He's a wizard with machines, a genius in blue jeans. Let's stop and say hello. My buddy Alfred, so-and-so, bricklaying engineer, surgeon, driving heavy gear, ain't nothing he don't know.
Yes, it's 100% true. I would not have been able to build this structure without the help of Alfred. And by the way, if you guys haven't noticed, he has his own YouTube channel now and you should definitely check it out. Well, over the last several weeks, Alfred and I have been very busy building.
And when I say building, I really mean it was a big effort to build. Because when the boxes showed up from Growspan, there were so many parts. I mean, just separating the parts and getting organized and getting situated was really the first order of business. And if I were to do anything over again in this process, I think I would have probably set up a better staging area for all the parts. I mean, this is like doing an IKEA furniture build on crazy amounts of like Lyle Alzado steroids. And so being organized there was super, super important. The other thing that is really worth considering if you're going to get a Hoop Coop kit or a greenhouse kit like this is even think about how you're going to unload it off the truck. You know, this came as 3 large pallets that the largest of the pallets actually maxed out my tractor to move. So you got to really think about how you're going to get it off the truck.
This is our height now. It's actually 1.5 inches lower than the post on that end, but it hit ledge.
So Alfred was super helpful when it came to figuring out how to site and square up the building. All his masonry experience really came in handy. The other thing that came in handy was this gas-powered post driver that I have. It is the most useful tool for something like this. I couldn't even imagine using a hand-powered post driver or like a sledgehammer to drive these posts in that then anchor the greenhouse into the ground. So having that gas-powered post driver was absolutely clutch. I usually use it for fencing, but it was super useful in this setting. The other thing that was very, very useful in this build was having it be a two-person project. I would say about 75% of the activities really do genuinely require two people at once. There's some things you can do solitarily, but I'm really glad I had Alfred as a buddy to come through and work through most of this stuff. And yes, he was always obsessively checking to make sure we had our lengths right and things were square. I think he's learned that lesson the hard way over the years. Once we had the posts in the ground, it became time to try to build the arches. The arches were made of a thick, heavy steel, and they came in multiple parts. I had to use these self-tapping screws and drive them in. That was a little bit tricky, but it wasn't too bad to get them in there, and so I just plowed away at this. And then once we had all of the arches assembled, it only took us maybe about an hour to try to build the entire structure. And I gotta say, if you want to go from feeling like you have nothing accomplished to having a whole heck of a lot accomplished, all you gotta do is put up the frame and you will feel like you've absolutely done a good day's work. And like I said, we had this whole thing stood up in, I think it was only about an hour, maybe it was 2 hours, but it wasn't a lot of time. I definitely couldn't imagine trying to stand this thing up by myself. I mean, I could have probably jury-rigged something with straps or a placeholder, but it would have taken me 5 or 6 hours to do it. There's definitely a force multiplier of two people working together. You can also see that as we started to hang the purlin across the top of the hoop coop. So the purlin is like part of the structure that keeps it all tied together and gives it some of that nice rigid building strength. And we decided to use my tractor as essentially a lift, and I would drive the tractor and Alfred would get up there and he would attach the screws and connect the purlins to the frame. This was really how we were starting to form the strength of the structure so it could withstand our heavy Vermont snow loads. And it worked out pretty well. Now some might be wondering, why didn't I go up there? Well, the answer is I'm terrified of heights. Now, the other thing that I think is really important to keep in mind when you're building one of these hoop coops is, although you're going to order the kit and it's going to have everything you need in terms of materials to build, the one thing it won't have is the lumber. And it does take a fair amount of lumber for the structure of the hoop coop. That lumber includes the baseboards, that lumber includes the runners along the sides for attaching the plastic, and so be ready to have to purchase a lot of lumber. And as you're doing your budgeting and figuring out how much it's going to cost to build your structure, keep in mind that you're going to have this lumber component. And given the price that pressure-treated lumber is these days, it was not cheap. And I'll also say, it was kind of awkward watching me try to unload this truck using my tractor. You know, I'm still very much a newbie tractor operator, and so I try to be super, super careful. And while I didn't do any damage as I moved this lumber, I wasn't necessarily the slickest and most skillful operator I feel like you've ever seen. And in terms of the lumber that we used, we had to use 4x4s for the structure, and we had to use a lot of 2x6s and 2x8s for the sideboards. So it was a mix of those types of pieces.
Did you know that I'm forklift certified?
Death of another tripod, Toby. The death of another tripod.
Now, because we have such heavy snow loads, there's actually 3 long purlins that have to be strung up across the length of the entire hoop coop. And given that this thing is nearly 100 feet long, that's a lot of material and that's a lot of time to string it all along. But again, because I was so afraid of having this thing get destroyed by bad weather, I preferred to overbuild versus underbuild. You know, the frame arches are about 4 feet apart, and these runners for the purlins go all the way down, you know, connecting every 4 feet. And because there's ultimately 3 of them, as well as a couple of side supports, I think that that's going to give me the strength I need. Once we had the purlins in place, it became time to put in these runner boards. These boards are used to fasten the plastic to the hoop coop structure. The other thing that's going to be very different from my original hoop coop is the fact that it's going to be multiple pieces of plastic instead of one big piece of plastic. Now you can see us here, we're putting the end post frame pieces together and putting them in place. Like I said, those are 4x4 pieces of pressure treated lumber. They're about 16 feet wide, and I think it goes up to be about 12 feet high. The point of doing this is I wanted to have a strong end wall at each side. And while sometimes people will bury these a couple feet in the ground, because we have such strong frost heaves, typically when I'm doing construction like this, I will actually use it just floating on top of the ground. And so you can see these little concrete pillars that the 4x4s rest in. And that's how we were able to get them set and in place. And then we just had to connect up the lumber and have it be there. The door that you see on this side of the hoop coop is going to be a bit different than the door that's going to be on the other side. This side is going to have a couple of human-sized doors, and the back side is going to have a big bay door. So here you see me working and building out the human-sized door side of things. And this was actually a morning that Alfred wasn't around, and I decided to try to tackle it myself. And you can see just how clumsy that process actually can be. I'm struggling to get the 4x4 up. I'm struggling to get it level. Then it's a matter of getting the frames in place for the doors. And even that, I wanted to be very careful and make sure that it was perfectly level, or as level as I could get it. And yeah, I kept falling down, and I had the dogs wandering around kind of laughing at me, but it was a very nice morning to work, quite frankly. Now, there's going to be 2 doors here, so you can see them here. There's one door on the left, one door on the right. Like I showed you, that's because I want to have the ability to have the ducks and geese move in and out frequently during the day without having to worry about them escaping. And so the idea is the door on the right is the door that I go into when I want to go into the hoop coop or let the birds out, and then the door on the left is for when it's time for the birds to come in and out, and then when I lock them up at night, I just have to close that one door. And yeah, this was going to be sort of a challenge. It kept raining the day that I was shooting this, and so I kept having to go inside and outside, inside and outside, and eventually I just said, heck, I'm just going to do this, and so that's what you see me doing right here. Now, ultimately, I'm going to get some shiplap to seal all this up, but I got to wait before we put the plastic on before I add the shiplap, because I want to be able to tuck the plastic into the frame of the end wall. Now, with Alfred back on the job, we decided to put up the U-channel, which is what's going to ultimately help pinch the plastic to the frame of the greenhouse. And so you see these channels that run down here. This is maybe the biggest difference between the hoop coop I built myself versus the hoop coop that I ultimately am building from Growspan here. So as I was building the Growspan Gothic Pro greenhouse, we just basically went through and put in nearly 100 feet of U-channel. And again, this is one of those steps that I could probably have done myself, but having Alfred there made it so much faster and so much easier versus, I don't know, this could have taken hours to do on the solo. Now, what's going to ultimately happen is we're going to take pieces of wiggle wire, which you'll see in a minute here, and that wiggle wire is going to slide into the channel of the U-channel, and that's going to pinch the plastic to the frame of the greenhouse. And so getting this secured and firm up against the wood is really important. If you screw this step up right here, your entire plastic could just blow away, and that would be an absolute disaster. And with the U-channels now in place, it became time to build out the plastic for the end wall. The end wall plastic is a bit different in terms of thickness and quality versus, say, the top cover. It's less transparent, but it's much, much stronger and much, much more rigid, which is really nice. So again, what's different between my old hoop coop and the new hoop coop is how these are multiple pieces of plastic and different strengths of plastic on it. You know, my hoop coop last year ripped because strong gusts of wind hit the end wall, and that started a small tear. And once there was that small tear, all it took was a few big gusts of wind to rip half of the greenhouse all the way apart. And so by putting this much more rigid plastic on the end walls, my hope is that this is also able to withstand the test of weather and hold up to our harsh Vermont winters. And again, because I'm terrified of heights, Alfred was the one who was typically doing stuff like this. And what was really funny is when I was telling Alfred how I was afraid of heights, he was up there on the crane and he was like, wait, this is heights? Of course, he's a guy who has traditionally worked on chimneys that are 40 feet off the ground, and so it doesn't really faze him. Versus me, I get dizzy when I get up this high, even on a ladder. So I was really appreciative to have my buddy Alfred's help on this one. Now, the big day was the day we put up all the plastic, and this really required more hands than just Alfred and me. As you can see here, I had a whole bunch of friends who came out to help, and I feel like we needed every single one of us. We picked a day where there was no wind, and we were able to just unroll the plastic, and as a group, slowly put it in place, and slowly tighten it. And here's where you first see us adding the wiggle wire. But yeah, I was super appreciative to have my friends Will, Jake, Jeff, the other Jeff, and Alfred all here to help me and get the plastic in place.
Getting the plastic up on the hoop house was a big turning point. You know, with the plastic now on here, this structure felt like an actual building instead of just a frame. And thanks to the help of my friends, it was just a major sense of accomplishment to have this stage complete. But now with the cover in place, it was time to get the doors on either end in place. This side is the side that I'm gonna be able to drive my tractor in and out of when I'm trying to do cleanup, and so it's gonna be a pretty massive door. The door uses the same material as these sidewalls here. And on this side, I needed to put up a whole lot of shiplap. Luckily, I have some on hand.
Now, this is pine shiplap, it's untreated, but this will hold up for many years to come. I actually like the look of the weathered, untreated pine, particularly when you have the rough edge facing out, and so that's what I used here. I've used this type of shiplap on most of the outbuildings I've built around the farm over the last couple of years. I think this also will help make it all kind of match, not that I think a lot about that sort of thing. Now, when it comes to the sidewalls, this was also the tougher, more rigid plastic like you have on the end walls. So while the top is very clear and translucent and somewhat thinner, these sides were really, really thick, and it's like a woven plastic material. And we just basically went through and connected with the wiggle wire into the U-channel. And so as we rolled it all out, it was important to keep it tight and have one person pulling and rolling the plastic out while the other person went through with the wiggle wire and slipped it through the channel and made sure it was there, and then we'd go through a second pass and tighten it up even further. And so that's what you see Alfred and I doing right here. This was important because this is how you get that nice, crisp, tight greenhouse. And then here we have the door that Alfred just installed. It looks awesome, and it just kind of crank rolls up and down nice and easily. And now let me take you inside and you can see our little building.
It feels so much warmer in here right now.
And then with the sides in place, it came time to string up the rope for the anti-billowing sides. These sides roll up and you don't want them to flap around, and so the rope keeps it nice and taut and keeps it in place. And then I had to build the final doors. It was going to be 2 doors, and I decided to use some extra plastic material I had to frame it up. I did this instead of building a solid door because I wanted the doors to be lightweight and breathable. You'll notice there's a lot of cracks on the end side. That's very intentional because I want to make sure that the building itself can breathe.
And so with the human and duck doors finally in place, things were kind of ready to go. And I'm happy to say that the structure is now complete. But let me give you guys a quick tour. Here, Abby, you can come back in. So the way I have this set up is, this right here is the human door. This is how I go in and out every single day. Usually though, during the day, I keep this door closed. This door right here, that's actually the bird door. So in the morning, when I let the birds out, that's what I open up to release the quacking. You'll actually notice though that both of these doors open inside. That's because in the wintertime, we get a lot of snow. And so I didn't want to have to deal with like having to dig out from underneath the doors. And so having inward facing doors was a smart move for me. I'm gonna have to be a little bit careful with how their bedding builds up on the ground. And even on this side, I had to dig a little space out for the door to be able to open and shut. But I personally think it's the better choice to have the doors open inward like that. Now around this corner, you'll see here, this is like the bird yard. This is where the birds spend most of their day when they're outside. Unless it's like really cold or really snowy, and then maybe they might want to stay inside. But they basically have their choice of going in and out all day with that open door. I put in this little chicken wire fence here just to keep the birds off of the house. And with the house, you'll notice there's these special ropes that go up and down. So the sides of the house can roll up and down. It's actually a super handy feature. So like in the summertime, if I want to ventilate, I can just open up those side flaps and everything will be much, much cooler in there. Right now I'm finding it runs about 20 degrees hotter inside than outside. But these ropes are really important because they're like for anti-billowing. That was another nice thing about the GrowSpan kit, is that it had all this stuff completely engineered. And like I said, as we were building it, this wiggle wire stuff is super, super key. This big bay door on the back is another nice feature. That way I can drive my tractor in and out as I clean it out. I just actually closed it just earlier this morning. I was finally able to drive my mobile chicken coop inside, and so I closed it up. And now that door is probably gonna stay closed until, I don't know, late April or early May, because the birds are gonna be out here using this yard that entire time. I do have to take my ATV out though, which I'll probably do when everybody goes to sleep tonight. You know, I set up their watering stations over here. I have a water hydrant over in that corner, so it makes it pretty convenient and easy. And when it comes time to put the birds to bed, I can just herd them all in. Come on. Come on, guys. Now, like I said, the birds are gonna spend the entire winter in here, and then I'll let them go back to free ranging in the springtime. And once I clear out all the compost late in the spring, what I'll end up doing is actually planting various crops inside the hoop coop, because my vision is to actually make this a dual purpose structure. You know, these buildings are actually not designed to house birds. They're traditionally designed to grow food. And so my plan would be, I would be able to grow food longer, like deeper into the fall. We usually will get our first frost like by mid-September. And so because of that, it really shortens my growing season. I could probably tack on an extra month, maybe even an extra 6 weeks between when I need to move the birds in. And so I'm envisioning growing certain crops. I'm gonna be experimenting a little bit, but of particular note, I'll probably be growing a lot of pumpkins and squash in there because those store really well and they make great feed for my birds. But that's a whole separate topic of video. Now, I really hope you guys have enjoyed watching us build Hoop Coop 2. If you want to check out GrowSpan and learn about their structures, they have structures pretty much for any size. I'll leave a link down in the description of this video. And if you want to check out my buddy Alfred's YouTube channel, check up here, or don't forget to subscribe to us, and I will see you guys in our next video. Thanks for watching, everybody.